Like, it's interesting how when we look at this Kabbalah, right, they tell you this is 22 paths, but people never really think about this like these are actual paths that people are actually on. They just think of it as like a theory of how, and they go into all this stuff, like the worlds are constructed, how life and the kingdom is running, and all this stuff that seems to have no application to them. But this is a reality of just saying you have 22 paths that you can take in this Sephiroth. Depending on what path you're on, and as they show in, I'm going to send the link across, it's called the Amphitheater. Kunrath created these diagrams that were all the alchemical diagrams. And these alchemical diagrams are the ones used today to bring you into an awareness of what they began to call Christian alchemy. Okay, and this is also some of the greats like what was the first name? Samuel Were, right? So if you've read, that's the Holy Matrimony and all of those, or the Divine Matrimony, those books that really go into, I mean, Were has some very powerful books on occultism, right? But that's also still called Christian alchemy, and it's called that because there was an effort to begin the process of bringing an awareness to the evolved state of consciousness, i.e. activation of Kundalini, right? So give me just 1 second here. I'm going to pull this because in this system of Christian alchemy, you had all of the greats of that time practicing that tradition. And let me just go to my history real quick here. Let me type in Kunrath, and that's K-U-N for those seeing. Actually, I think it's K-H. There we go. Kunrath, that's K-H-U-N-R-A-T-H for those looking at this in the future. And if there's no link to this somewhere for you. And the actual presentation here, which I'm copying inside the chat, is called The Alchemy of the Amphitheater, right? And this is based on, it's called Infinite Fire. There's 3 of these. It's the Infinite Fire webinar. And this gentleman, he breaks down the definitions of the alchemical. He breaks down the definitions of the alchemical designs that Kunrath was drawing in his amphitheater, which was basically the alchemistic diagrams that people are using today, but generally for show. Like, because these diagrams, they look like you should know something, but not few people have interpreted them because they're in Latin. Now, what you'll hear him mention, I think it's somewhere around the 56-minute mark, is you'll hear him break down that basically this guild of because this was John Dee, all of these people were all in the same circle. They were all in the Royal Society practicing royal magic. And they had this chart where they showed that there were 22 paths that you could really go down. And they explained what these 22 paths were from an occult level. Now, he only breaks down 2 paths because he's interpreting it from the Latin. He says one path was basically the path of being able to create, as we called it, the Immaculus, the Golden Lotus, being able to actually create another entity with your own mind. That's one of the paths, right? But Kunrath makes a note that this path led to a certain level of perils through vanity. But then, so he also mentions that basically out of all the 22 paths, only one of the paths were not a dead end. So this just means that in the world, Islam could be one of the 22 paths, but there would be a dead end at a certain point. It wouldn't lead you to yourself. And what they showed is that there's only one path that would lead you to yourself. And then on that path, they put the Hermetic symbol, Hermes. So you would need to know the meaning of Hermes, which is know yourself, as above, so below, etc. You would need to know that maxim to not fall into now just trying to worship Hermes. You see what I mean? You would know that the only path that doesn't lead to a dead end is actually the path through and back to yourself. So there would be no need for any gods before you. You could not have any gods before you. That's why God says, you cannot have any gods before me. See, people are reading these things and they're reading like the God is dictating this, but they have to realize that they're the God, and It's really them speaking and saying, yo, don't put any gods or anything higher than you in your consciousness. I don't care who it is, your baby, your significant other, your husband, your wife. The moment you do that, you block your energy from you to your higher self. Now they're more important than you. And man, if you're somehow in a position where you need to take care of them, you just screwed everybody just because you have everything in the wrong order. You have to have what you would say is your higher self, because we know this is the mundane. So there's got to be a higher essence of this. So this, when we say the higher self, that's what we're referring to. The thing that when this dies and you're still thinking that, right? So that higher self cannot be interrupted by something else that is sitting in between, because the moment that something in between makes you mad, makes you upset, makes you angry, tells you to do something that's contrary to your own principles, whatever, it violates the God. Do you see what I mean? And so these principles will lead you to that one path back to yourself. It will allow you to have taken all this as an experience and write your own destiny, to create a different path in your DNA that doesn't lead to war, pestilence, famine, destruction, etc., being blot out, which is an existence that is happening now. We can't say, well, yeah, that would never happen anyway. It's happening now, and it's happening to millions of souls. Now, what you get is that opportunity, just like I was saying earlier, that not a lot of people get the opportunity to really study real occultism and spirituality. It doesn't call them. But it's like that path in life is like when you're ready to really go home. You got to realize what's happening here. If there's 22 other paths, that could be the tangent that most people are on, trying to find another God. When you could have had landed on the money this life for real and really have been in a life where you're now ready to walk the path to yourself. And what that path will allow you to do is everything that I talked about earlier in this conversation about this reality and what it's headed to and its collective bubble-like consciousness. That won't be your destiny. And that's what's being presented to you. So I wanted to say wholeness and balanced vibrations. Thank you so much for taking the time and the opportunity to build today in this way with me about just becoming more mature about the power we have and getting reinforced about what we need to be doing now, not falling asleep into a normality that is not normal at all, but actually finishing this process and heading towards the goal of yourself.